We tend to understand our identities in terms of binary opposites. Gay or straight, boy or girl, white or person of color, Republican or Democrat, Marvel or DC. By saying something is one thing or the other, it helps us order the world in a way that's easily understood. Yet identities are so much more complicated than that. So in order to understand these identities, we humans created spectrums. Spectrums embrace ambiguity, fluidity, and everything that comes in between. But there are dozens of different types of spectrums, and it can be difficult to understand them. So, what are spectrums? Spectrums are tools and concepts, usually shown as visual aids, that represent and help us plot out different identities. The most popularly used spectrum is a linear spectrum, and it may look like this. Here, we have a sexuality spectrum. On this end, someone is sexually attracted to people of the opposite gender, straight. On the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are attracted to people of the same sex, gay. Right in the middle is what most people consider to be exact bisexuality, or liking both genders equally. Many people identify with being on one end of the spectrum or the other, yet many others identify somewhere within the spectrum. Like me, for example. I identify right here. While I am attracted to all genders, I tend to be more attracted to people of my same gender, women. So that's why I place my dot here. However, some people, like myself, feel varying levels of attraction at different times. Let's say a guy found men and women both equally attractive, but sometimes felt more attracted to women than to men. That person's spectrum may look like this. They would identify on different places within these brackets at different times, but they're always going to be within those brackets. So a gay person might be here, a straight person might be here, a bisexual person might be here or here, and a sexually fluid person might be anywhere. It's important to note that all spectrums and identities are open to interpretation. Someone who identifies as gay may actually put themselves here on the spectrum, understanding that while they may have some attraction to the opposite sex, they still identify as gay. And they may do that for a multitude of reasons, social reasons, political reasons, personal reasons, whatever matters to them. And that's okay. I still identify as bisexual even though I find women more emotionally attractive than men. You can apply spectrums to anything. There's a gender spectrum. There's a gender expression spectrum. There's an amount of sexual attraction spectrum, an emotional attraction spectrum, political spectrum, autism spectrum, masculinity and femininity spectrum, the Star Trek versus Star Wars fandom spectrum. By the way, I'm all the way on the end of the Star Trek one. There's literally a spectrum for anything that you can think of, because things aren't just one thing or the other. But what if you're a huge fan of both Star Trek and Star Wars? Where would you place yourself on this spectrum? You can't, because by placing things at binary opposites of each other, you can't be both. Seeing things in binary is still unfortunately the norm, but we're discovering that things are much more complicated than that. Being feminine doesn't mean you can't be masculine at all, and many people identify as genders that have nothing to do with being a man or a woman. So where would they even be on a gender spectrum between man and woman? As you can see, linear spectrums have their limitations. That's why there's a variety of spectrum models. One is color wheels. Here's a gender one. This one allows people to be varying levels of multiple things. Like someone who identifies as a demi-guy, someone who is genderqueer but also feels somewhat like a guy, may identify here. Yet, like on the linear model, you don't have to be one specific point. I identify like this, a big ol' area on the color wheel that I may change identifying within depending on the day. Because I identify as a trans woman, a demi-girl, and gender fluid, and this allows me to showcase all those identities. Believe me, it hurts my head too. Moving beyond that, there are still even more models. The trans student educational resources have a wonderful model called the gender unicorn. This model lets you identify with different aspects of gender, sex, physical attraction, and emotional attraction, all completely separate from each other. This is what my gender unicorn looks like. Isn't it cute? It's so adorable. I identify as mostly a woman, but with some aspects of being a man and other genders. My gender expression is mostly masculine, but with some femininity. I was assigned male at birth. I'm physically attracted to men and genderqueer people more than I am women, but I'm more emotionally attracted to women and genderqueer people than I am to men. It's complicated. But using this spectrum helps me break down and understand my complexities even more. And honestly, at the end of the day, you can create your own spectrum that works for you. It can be a line, a wheel, a 3D sphere, a scatter plot, a bar graph, even a universe. Because all spectrums are there just to help you understand yourself and how you identify within the world, and to give other people a shorthand to understand you a little bit better. Don't let the spectrum define you. You define the spectrum. Spectrums do have a tendency to oversimplify ideas, but at the end of the day, spectrums are just tools to help us understand that the world is much more complicated and beautiful than a limited binary lets us think. So what does your spectrum look like? Comment below and share this video because I would love to see how you identify.